of questions for both of you about how you work together, how you work apart. Probably a good spot to start is one, let's talk about the publishing house a little, and then two, let's just start and dive right into the Wysman. But Sarah, I'm going to ask you to take this one, and then I'll have Dorothy take the next question first. But if you would, just tell us a little bit about Inspired Quill.
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, we were set up in April 2011. It was April 5th that I got the official paperwork through. I did want to incorporate the business on April 1st, but was told by friends and family to take life a little bit more seriously, so I caved. So yeah, as I mentioned, we were a book review blog to begin with me doing English at university. Figured this was a thing. I enjoyed, sharing opinions on the internet, because what young 20-something doesn't enjoy sharing opinions on the internet? And yeah, as I was saying, we were kind of set up from the righteous rage I felt by, hearing lots and lots of horror stories about the industry, not just from self-published and indie published authors, but mostly authors from the big six, as they were back then, before Penguin Random House happened. So we started out basically publishing anything, and very quickly I realized that was not a thing that we should do, because selling poetry is much, much different to selling science fiction, is different to, publishing children's books, for example. So we niched down only slightly. But all the way through this process, I was very keen to have mindful authors. So non-tokenistic diversity, very keen to, to elevate voices within the industry. And of course, we've got an awful lot of work still to do on that, even 9 years later. But that's always been our ethos, so much so that we have a diversity pledge on the website. And I've done lots of events, workshops to do with not just working in the industry and trying to pull the curtain back, because there's a lot of smoke and mirrors, as I'm sure many of your listeners are aware of generally, but also kind of trying to give stepping stones to people who want to work in the industry. And yeah, positive publishing, basically, or trying anyway.
So 9 years and you haven't sorted out diversity in publishing?
I've been trying.
Maybe
I've been trying.
Is the one. So the diversity pledge, what does that mean, and how do you put that in action?
So it's really interesting because, we've been going for 9 years, and I've always said, non-tokenistic diversity is incredibly important. But actually, we didn't have a diversity pledge on the website until about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, because I made the mistake of thinking, well, it's obvious. Obviously, non-tokenistic diversity is important, and isn't everyone doing that? So, a couple of years ago, I kind of realized that actually, no, it's not obvious, and that's the problem. So I kind of, created the diversity pledge, popped it on the Inspired Quill website, and to my guilt, I guess, I didn't really do much else apart from that. And it's something that, we've been working quite hard on for the last few months, certainly this year, to really not just talk about change and making actions for ourselves to get rid of, any unconscious bias that we might have, and to reach out to others in the industry, but also to really think long and hard about changes to the system as well. So working with other people within the industry to affect real change, rather than just, we've got a book with this kind of protagonist, box tick, which is exactly what we're against. So the diversity pledge itself is split into 4 different parts. The first part is diversity in books. So, we understand inclusive books to mean great mainstream stories, not isolated as a separate genre or segregated strand of literature. Writing mindfully, choosing characters by turn and not defaulting, that sort of thing. The second part is reader representation. So, we're committed to ensuring that all readers can find authentic representations of themselves in books. And also that goes towards the fact that the books, events and mentoring are as accessible as possible. Talks, panels, workshops, they're not just going to be at, universities, that sort of thing. And sort of avoiding tropes on book covers as much as possible, not whitewashing book covers, which is actually one of the specific things that tipped me over the edge to make Inspired Quill in the first place. And taking on board reader feedback and not being defensive and realizing that we'll always have work to do. The other two sections are a little bit drier, I guess, but within the industry still really important. So diversity when it comes to author and volunteer community. So one thing to let you know about Inspired Quill is that we're all volunteers, basically. So I've been running it for 9 years, and I used to call it my very expensive hobby. It is now my hobby that pays for itself.
Hey, moving up in the world. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things. It's a little bit of a catch-22 situation, I guess, whereby, I work a full-time job and then work Inspired Quill evenings and weekends, and have been doing for 9 years, simply because, I haven't had the capacity to build it to where I need to. And, the circle continues, unfortunately. So for the author and volunteer community section of the diversity pledge, it's, being committed to providing a space where everyone feels comfortable and welcome to not only submit work to us, and I've done a lot of work on the submissions page on the Inspired Quill website to
and that website address for people that want to get right there, right as they're listening.
Sure. It's www.inspired-quill.com. And then, things like fostering a good community within the authors. Dorothy will probably be able to tell you a little bit more about that and how we work together as a real community, rather than, just a couple of best-selling authors and then everyone else kind of, clawing for attention. And the last thing is, in the diversity pledge, the last thing is about equality in business. So, it describes what we see as diversity, so what that actually means to us, and our commitment to engage with industry colleagues at all levels, and challenge the status quo where possible, seeking partnerships, lifting other voices, even if they're not ours, and being really transparent with the mistakes we make and the learning as we go forward.
I sense that you have lots of feelings about the way big publishing does things. And Steve, Sara told me that she's got a pint of tea that she's going to be enjoying, and I'm going to try to get her to spill all of it before we get to the end.
I see what you did there.
I try to say at least 2 clever things per episode. That's one. So wait for the other audience. It'll be exciting. And then Dorothy, why don't you pick up the thread? Because eventually I want to get to the point where, almost like a professional romance, we'll learn the story of how you crazy kids came together to make the Wysman. How did you hear about Inspired Quill? What attracted you to them?
There's an online site called Absolute Right, WRITE, Absolute Right, where a lot of authors hang out and share information and support one another. And one of Inspired Quill's authors was on there talking about how much he liked working with Inspired Quill. I think it was Ben Hennessy, I think.
Oh, thanks, Ben.
Yeah, I think that's who it was. And at the time, I was, submitting to small presses, and Inspired Quill at least at that point, was running a one month a year where they would take open submissions. And I just submitted, and they took it. And now, that wasn't this book. That was The Wind Reader, which is the first book in this series. And then The Wysman is the second one. So they just surprised me by writing back and saying, sure. So that's not very dramatic. But it would certainly left me excited. I was jumping up and down. So, and I have found it to be a really good place to work, to work with people to work with who treat me, I would say, honestly, and ethically and openly too. Tell me what's going on. Don't try to hide things from me. And you would think that would be standard practice, but it turns out it's not. And I'm happy that I stumbled upon it, or that I'm happy that Ben bragged it up. So there you go.
Well, I think Dorothy's got some tea also. We could have ourselves a very pleasant conversation.